Well, Charles, that's a heavy metal opening to a down under show. Welcome back to the U.S.
It's great to be back, and it's great to be joined by the eminent Michael Smith, who is gracing us now with his pleasure all the way from parts unknown in Asia. Welcome, Michael.
G'day. It's good morning here. It's about 2 a.m. in my part of the world.
Thanks so much. It really means a lot that you're able to join us. We're just going to start by spending a few seconds, Michael, if it's okay, glorying in this poster that Jason has put together.
Yeah.
I don't know if you got that up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Jason's art department has phenomenal resources, hundreds of people. I see it's a very small art department, but somehow he manages week after week, show after show, to put together these fantastic posters. And of course, this is a takeoff on Mad Max. We have the zombie, who is well known and rising from the dead, the political dead again. And the person to her left, of course, is meant to be Alexander Downer.
Yeah, it's a little difficult to find photos of Alexander Downer in profile. There are many more photographs of him dressed in drag, oddly. So I don't know, Michael, if you have any commentary on that.
Yeah, he's typically depicted in fishnet stockings in Australia. He's a bumbling buffoon, in my opinion. He led our conservative political forces here for a few months. He's probably the shortest, in fact, he is the shortest serving leader of the Conservative political party here in Australia. And its name, it's confusing, but its name is the Liberal Party with a capital L. But they're by no means liberals as you would call, refer to liberals in the United States. And Downer led that party, but only for a matter of months. And there's an hilarious show on YouTube, or a little segment on YouTube, you can look it up, called the Downer Months, that relates to his months in the leadership.
Amazing. But Alexander Downer, of course, for a long time was the foreign minister of Australia. Isn't that right, Michael?
Yeah, that's right. He was responsible for our foreign aid budget, and Australia's foreign minister is analogous to your Secretary of State, so he had the job that Hillary had. And he was dispensing aid, in the Asia-Pacific region and all around the world. He got us into Iraq. He then went on from his life in politics to work for the UN. He worked in Cyprus for a while, and then he became Australia's senior diplomat in the United Kingdom in London. And it was there in that role that he crossed paths with George Papadopoulos.
How normal is that, Michael? In this country, I can't think of a case where a Secretary of State downgrades to be the ambassador, even to an important country like the UK.
In our system, it's absolutely normal.
Really?
The fellow who's in that role now, George Brandis QC, he was the Federal Attorney General in the Conservative government, and he moved from that job. He was a senator in our Senate and in the cabinet as the Attorney General. He went straight from that job directly. He resigned and went directly in to replace Downer in London. So those jobs for the boys, those political sinecures, are quite common in Australia. It's open, I think, to an outside observer, and certainly to many Australians, to view those appointments as corrupt, as corrupting, and as opening people up to corruption. But that's part of our system here. In fact, we have the amazing spectacle of the most recent past foreign minister, that's Julie Bishop, going straight onto the boards of a number of aid entities, people who receive, foreign aid funds from Australia. And our immediate past defence minister, fellow called Christopher Pyne, who's gone straight onto the board of a number of defence related contractors. And it beggars belief that our political system tolerates that. And I think it's something, that Australia needs to look carefully at. But that said, we don't have a tremendous track record in dealing with payment of corrupt monies. And in fact, it seems to me that we go out of our way to cover it up. And I'm talking about our political class here. And obviously what I'm referring to is the Clinton Foundation and the fact that well north of $100 million of Australian taxpayers' money was donated to the Clinton Foundation in the most dubious of circumstances. And the man that started that whole ball rolling is Alexander Downer.
It's really something. And of course, Michael, we have a page that we'll go into after we're done getting this latest update of the many, many links that are on your website. You've done literally dozens of stories on the Clinton Foundation going back certainly to 2016, if not before. Very excellent work. At the time when you were doing it, people still assumed that Hillary Clinton might become president of the United States. And so there was a reluctance in the 15-16 election cycle to really get to the bottom of it. But what I can report to you, Michael, is that around the world, multiple countries have woken up and are watching this very, very carefully. And the first country out of the box to try to get their money back will likely succeed in getting their money back. You don't want to be the last country trying to get your money back because there may not be that much money left for you. But the things have certainly...
What is the position? What is the position with the Clinton Foundation balance sheet at present? What are they holding?
Well, it's not, lucky for everybody, it's not the Clinton Foundation balance sheet that even matters. The position that people will be taking, I believe, is that this was never actually a validly organized not-for-profit corporation, which means that all of the trustees are personally liable. And there are quite a few billionaires who are trustees. In addition, under our system, under our system, you can also go against the donors, the significant donors to the foundation. So Bill Gates, his foundation, anybody else who is in a position to exercise significant influence and control under the U.S. system would be vulnerable.
So that's sort of a catch-22 for the Australian taxpayer, in that the Australian government was a donor to the Clinton Foundation, and it strikes me that it may be difficult for us to stick our hand up and say we want our money back.
Well, I think what other governments are looking at is that you were duped, and that there was a conspiracy to dupe your government and then to obstruct any serious investigation into the duping. And the other deep pockets, of course, that do exist here are the accounting firms. And there are numerous accounting firms and their insurers who I believe are at risk here, because the work, in quotes, that was done here is so sloppy and so reckless and so unprofessional over so many years that it would never withstand the withering barrage of lawsuits under the U.S. system that would come civilly and criminally.
Well, when you use the word duped, that the Australian taxpayer was duped, the man who was duped in the first instance is Alexander Downer, and it's really, I mean, it's embarrassing, it's cringeworthy to look at the way he was fawning all over Bill Clinton when Clinton came out here on a speaking tour. Well, a booze up, really. It was. I mean, he turned up to the announcement of our $25 million supposed MOU with the Clinton Foundation. He was sick. He didn't go to a number of the engagements. He turned up, he had his head in his hands, he had a shocker of a headache. He was obviously unwell, tired and emotional, is another way to put it. He had been engaged by an impresario in Australia, a fellow called Max Markson. Max Markson's claim to fame is dwarf throwing competitions, pavlova sitting, wet t-shirt competition. I mean, it was really, really low end stuff that Max was involved with back in 2006 when he bought Bill Clinton out. So he had the same sorts of people that to whom dwarf throwing or pavlova sitting, that's girls in bikini sitting on a pavlova. My God, it's just crass, horrid stuff. And Bill Clinton was thrown into that milieu giving his speeches. So he turns up to this $25 million announcement, obviously unwell, didn't go to a couple of the further engagements that he was expected to front up at, but Alexander Downer was fawning all over him. Oh, Mr. President, I've read your memoirs, your amazing job that you have done. And at this time, Clinton was a disbarred lawyer who was incapable of acting in any capacity for a US charity, and yet he held himself out as the founder of the Clinton Foundation and explained that the Clinton Foundation was engaged in ameliorating HIV and AIDS and in so-called work on HIV and AIDS through the Asia Pacific. And do you know, gentlemen, that not an iota of due diligence was conducted by Alexander Downer or his department to get to the heart of the truth or not of Clinton's claims. And that is what really commenced this corrupt relationship between the Clinton Foundation and Australian taxpayers funding it to the tune of well north of $100 million. But the first step of that was $25 million that was arranged by Downer. And if you like, I can step you through the reasons, and there's about 6 or 7 of them,
Sure.
that I say that was corrupt and criminally corrupt. The first of them is that the memorandum of understanding that was signed to great fanfare by Downer and Clinton stipulated that the Australian government was going to put in $25 million to be matched dollar for dollar by the Clinton Foundation. So that was an overt statement. We're going to put in 25 mil. This fabulous Clinton Foundation is going to put in 25 mil. And the 25 mil from us, of course, was paid. 25 mil from Clinton was forgotten about. Never enforced. No follow-up action taken. Just, Bill said he was going to put in 25 million, but now he's not. Oh, well, not to worry. We've put in our 25 mil. And Downer continued to do business with the Clinton Foundation even after that first fairly obvious default on the part of the Clintons. The second point that should have set alarm bells ringing for Alexander Downer and his department, it's embarrassing to even talk about it. But the second point is this, that we thought we were engaging the Clinton Foundation because of its specific competence, its expertise in HIV and AIDS epidemiology, and in advancing the cause of curbing these, horrid diseases and making life easier for people who are suffering, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You got the idea? So if we're going to do that, if we're going to give $25 million to this expert company, I would have thought that the person that they put forward as in charge of their HIV AIDS operation in the Asia Pacific region would be somebody with just a modicum of experience in HIV and AIDS. Well, that wasn't the case. Clinton said in Sydney that he would like to pay tribute to the person who runs his Asia operation. So Downer can't have missed this. It's in the transcript. Clinton said it at the time when he signed the MOU in Sydney in February of 2006. I would like to pay tribute, he says, to the person who runs our Asia Pacific operation, Ruby Shang. Who is Ruby Shang? Well, Ruby's an earth-moving contractor from Vietnam. Honest to God, she had the Caterpillar earth-moving dealership in Vietnam. Like, this is bulldozers and earth-moving equipment. And she, part-time, represented the Clinton Foundation, and she's put forward in Sydney at the time they signed this $25 million MOU was the person who will be responsible for their HIV AIDS operation, predominantly in Papua New Guinea, a country in which she had no expertise, and HIV AIDS, an area in which she had no expertise at all. She's an earth-moving contractor. How in God's name did Downer and his team not discover that fact? I mean, it was...
Well, it's perfect. So, they're digging up dirt.
Well, isn't it just... I mean, I'm embarrassed as an Australian taxpayer and an Australian citizen. I'd love to find black humour in it, but I just think it is so appalling that somebody so manifestly incapable, manifestly unsuitable, although it gets worse. I'll come to how it gets worse in a sec, because the person who replaced Ruby Shang was even less capable than Ruby was. But the third point I'd like to say, the first one is the 25 mil that never materialised from the Clintons. The second point is they put forward Ruby Shang, the Caterpillar earth-moving contractor, to run the contract for them. The third point is this. Our big hoopla of an announcement said we're putting $25 million into this MOU with the Clinton Foundation to ameliorate AIDS, HIV in Papua New Guinea and other places. The Clinton and we said that we're bringing the Clinton Foundation's expertise here into the Asia Pacific. Isn't the Australian government great for doing that? Well, it turns out that unannounced by Downer, and perhaps unbeknownst to him, because their level of due diligence was so poor that they didn't find anything else out, they probably wouldn't have discovered this. The Clinton Foundation was already operating in Papua New Guinea and it was funded there by Unitaid, the European World Health Organization entity involved in charitable works and medical-related initiatives throughout the Asia Pacific. So the Clinton Foundation is already in PNG. It's got the same personnel as it's reporting to Australia as being funded by this Australian operation, and it's already being funded by Unitaid in PNG. So the accretion of value, if you will, through Australia tipping in more money, wasn't to the account of Papua New Guinea and greater AIDS operations, anti-AIDS operations there. It was direct to the Clinton Foundation. Just goes straight to their bottom line. I've seen the reports to Unitaid and I've seen the reports to Australia. Same activity, same statements, same people. The fourth disgusting feature of the Clinton Foundation's operations in Papua New Guinea, funded by the Australian government, and this is Australian taxpayer money, is that the so-called antiretroviral drugs that the Clinton Foundation introduced into the region came from Ranbaxy, an Indian company operated by the Singh brothers, the Dodgy brothers, which sold and was known to be selling adulterated, ineffective pharmaceuticals, including HIV antiretroviral drugs. When I say it was known, the World Health Organization released a report, a damning report, and ultimately the United States Food and Drug Administration, I think that's the name of it, but the equivalent entity, your Food and Drug Authority, conducted massive investigations into Ranbaxy and found that it had sold routinely drugs that had no therapeutic value, that were counterfeit, that were completely dodgy, and Australian money went into funding that via the Clinton Foundation, so that some poor bugger who's got HIV and is told, well, you take this antiretroviral drug and it's going to assist in managing and suppressing the disease, in fact might as well have been taking lollies or something from the candy store. I mean, that's just shocking. And our due diligence at the time did not uncover it. That's something that's been covered up by, certainly it started with Downer. He's got to take the blame for it. The fifth point that I'd make is that Ruby Shang, the Caterpillar dealership, the earth-moving contractor from Vietnam, was replaced by somebody who the Clinton Foundation put into Papua New Guinea to run this multi-million dollar HIV/AIDS initiative. So who did Clinton select? A young fellow called Zachary Katz, a graduate straight out of university, who at the time was an accounts payable clerk processing compensation claims for an insurance company, or as Zachary Katz himself described himself on his LinkedIn history, he was a, quote, payment operations associate. Why the hell would the Australian government pay $25 million to an intermediating organisation, the Clinton Foundation, so that it can employ a graduate, a young kid straight out of college, a payment operations associate, to go into this most corrupt of countries, Papua New Guinea? It's the most complex place to operate in, and he's got no experience in HIV or AIDS or international development. He's plonked in there, and Downer and his department say nothing. They just say, oh, well, that's lovely, isn't it? We're putting in a young kid straight out of university who's a payment operations associate, going to run this complex $25 million deal, and they don't arc up about it. They just let that go straight through to the keeper.
He's a Brooklyn
hipster. The sixth
hipster.
point I would make, there you go. Thank you very much. That's precisely right. I mean, it's funny to look back on it and laugh, but can you imagine in the corporate world going to your boss saying, oh, I got this $25 million deal, and I'm going to put the kid straight out of uni in to run it in a very complex, corrupt country. It's beyond laughable. It's beyond belief, in fact. And the fact that Downer, I mean, in our system of government, he's the minister, he's the man responsible. He didn't discover this. He was so, he was dazzled by the celebrity of the Clintons and just accepted and face value, oh, it's Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation. My God, this is fabulous. I've got a wonderful frame photo now of me shaking hands with Bill. The sixth point that I would make, this should have set alarm bells off immediately, because this goes to the heart of the transfer of Australian taxpayers' money into the Clinton Foundation. The sixth point is this. In Papua New Guinea and in Australia too, the lowest level of incorporated entity in other words, like a proprietary limited company or a listed company, the lowest level of scrutiny, the easiest to achieve is to incorporate an association. And typically incorporated associations are things like local sporting clubs, children's football associations, that sort of thing. They're set up for charitable or religious purposes. There's not a particularly high level of scrutiny on their financial reports, and it's relatively easy to set one up if you're genuine. And what I mean by genuine is if there's an existing unincorporated association, the local footy club, and all the members say, yep, we want to become incorporated so that we don't have personal liability, so that we can sue and be sued, so that we can own property, blah, 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 blah. So the Clinton Foundation sets itself up as an association in Papua New Guinea, and one of the attractions to fraudsters is that incorporated associations aren't obliged to file financial returns. They're just expected to keep books which may be inspected. And the Australian government didn't arc up when the entity that it was dealing with is the Clinton Foundation Incorporated Association. It's sort of like the entity that you would set up to manage the tea and coffee club, to make sure that there's milk in the fridge, and you know what I mean? That sort of thing. And the incorporation of that entity, which was accomplished by Ruby Shang, was manifestly fraudulent. Manifestly fraudulent. Here are a few of the reasons that I can be confident in saying that. Number one, you have to put an ad in the local paper to say, we intend 30 days after the expiration of this advertisement to apply for the incorporation of this association. I'd imagine you have similar provisions in the United States. Things like a 30-day, put an ad in the paper, say we're going to incorporate 30 days hence, and you've got to wait for 30 days. Well, their ad goes in the paper, they incorporated the same day. Another element of the incorporation that was clearly fraudulent is that the incorporated association has to have its rules, it has to have its arrangements, its objects, etc., lodged with the regulator. They just put in the Clinton Foundation's US Articles of Association, nothing to do with Papua New Guinea. The affidavits that Ruby Sheng had to put in support of that incorporation are all just lies, black and white lies. She says there's been a meeting of the members of the unincorporated association. There couldn't have been, because there was no Clinton Foundation association with its members in Papua New Guinea. And the Australian government paid that entity and didn't realise, or if it did, it turned a blind eye to the fraudulent nature of the incorporation of that association. And the seventh is my most damning point. Here's the last point that Downer, really, he should be ashamed of himself over it. It's this. An audit report, a completion report, was created, and an audit was conducted on this Clinton Foundation activity in Papua New Guinea. To say it was damning is an understatement. The audit report said the only project document, the only defining project document.
Did we lose you, Michael? Oh, so there we go. The most damning point gets cut off. Let me see if we can get Michael back there, Charles.
That's good, because I have quite a few reactions to what he's saying there. It's excellent.
Poor connection, it says. Let's see if we can get him back here. Well, feel free to give us
Sure.
your
I mean,
commentary,
one thing while we're trying to get Michael back, a couple things. First thing is that there's been a book out in May called Bottle of Lies by the woman Catherine Eban, who, if that's the way you pronounce her last name, who did the article in Fortune Dirty Medicine. Now, that book claims at the end, I haven't read it, it's been characterized to me, that it's not, as Michael described, simply a case of people thinking they're taking medicine and in fact having lollipops. What they were taking is really bad, because it potentially weakens the resistance to real drugs, to take these bad drugs. So by some estimates cited in her book, it is possible that as many as 10 million people per year through 2050 will die from what these people were doing with these bad generic drugs. It's not just Ranbaxy, it's all bad generic drugs.
Wow. So lollipops would have been way better for them.
Lollipops would have been a lot better, yeah.
He's totally disconnected now. I wonder.
It could be a local problem with power or something. He's in the middle of, we won't say what country, but he's in the middle. And let's hope he calls us back.
Yeah, that was waiting for the 7th point. I love it when every single point is like stunningly bad. And he's like, and another thing.
Well, I think I can help him. I think I know where he's going with that 7th point. So when he mentioned that the articles of incorporation that were used were those of the parent company, Clinton Foundation. Well, those articles of incorporation, as we've drilled home in prior broadcasts, those aren't actually proof that the entity was organized. Those are just proof that the very first step of incorporating took place. So I'll be curious to see what version were provided into Papua New Guinea. The second point that Michael may or may not be aware of is that under U.S. law, they had no authority to do what they did. They were approved to be a presidential archive and research facility on a specific assumption that they would be geographically based, not everywhere in the United States, but just in a certain portion, in a city park, to be established then in 1997 in a certain portion of Little Rock, Arkansas. They had no authority.
Okay, we've got him coming back. Sorry, Charles.
No problem. You there, Michael?
I think we've got him now. Michael, you back?
Yes.
Okay.
So sorry about that, gentlemen.
That's quite right.
I was just saying the audit report on the Clinton Foundation's alleged spend of our money in Papua New Guinea was damning. It in essence found that because there was at the start no statement of objectives or purposes, no agreed outcome as to what the Clinton Foundation would do, it was impossible to determine whether or not it had been successful, whether the money had been well spent, because there was no defining document to say this is how they're going to spend the money, this is what they're going to do, this is what they're going to achieve. The fact that purportedly competent minister and a government of a country like Australia, a developed country, an aid donor, could enter into arrangements like that it's beggars belief. And I can't think of another circumstance or another contractor that would be treated in the same way as the Clinton Foundation was. And not only was it allowed to get away with that at the time, but the Australian government continued with subsequent ministers to just donate more and more and more, well north of $100 million, to this entity that you didn't have to scrape the surface terribly, terribly deeply to find out just how corrupt and incompetent it was.
It's amazing, Michael. So a couple of observations. The version of the Articles of Incorporation that were provided in Papua New Guinea, were those the articles dated October 23rd, 1997?
Let me go to my files. I can't recall off the top of my head.
As a guess, they likely were. And I news for you. Since the last time you and I spoke, you were on our show, we've established that the Articles of Incorporation that were filed in Arkansas do not qualify as an organizing document under Arkansas state law. The fact that you've just filed something, even though it looks official, that was cottoned up, and the version I'm talking about was written by lawyers, does not mean that the trustees came together and held an organizational meeting and amended the Articles of Incorporation to reflect that not lawyers but trustees had come together and held an organizational meeting. So even what they provided in Papua New Guinea and around the world and to many states, that under Arkansas law does not qualify, it does not establish that they were actually organized.
Well, there's several levels of corporate misconduct there. There is the defining moment in 97 that you're talking about, and then the presentation of those Articles of Incorporation to the Papua New Guinea corporate regulator in 2006 as a replacement for what had to be, what should have been a locally set up association with its own rules and objects and intended outcomes in Papua New Guinea itself. They just handed over those articles that you just mentioned, which were dodgy in the first instance. And the Papua New Guinea corporate regulator, who must have been lent on, because it's patently obvious on the face of it that these documents are not what the Act of Incorporation requires in PNG. The incorporation of that thing is so clearly, manifestly fraudulent, and the Australian government, which audited it, just covered it up. just accepted it and continued to pay money. And on top of that, by the by, Charles, Jason, and everybody listening, the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc., was the entity that Australia initially contracted with. Bill Clinton held himself out as an authorised representative or manager of that entity and signed over that letterhead, over that signature block, Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. Now, that entity, to the extent that it ever existed, was clearly dissolved out of existence by the Massachusetts corporate regulator in 2007, 2008, from memory. But I can say with certainty that the Massachusetts regulator dissolved that entity, and it had the initials CHAI, Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative. The Clintons replaced that with an entity with the same initials, Clinton Health Access Initiative, and it held itself out as CHAI and just continued rolling along with the Australian government, paying it as if it was some successor to the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative, Inc. And our Minister, Julie Bishop, was clearly complicit in assisting the cover-up or the passing off of this second entity, Clinton Health Access Initiative, which covered up for the fact of the dodgy existence of its predecessor and the fact that the predecessor entity had been dissolved by a corporate regulator for failing to file financial returns, and the Australian government continued to pay money to it, tens and tens of millions of dollars. Now, I've reported these matters to the Australian government, but its inaction is breathtaking, and I'm certain that the motivation for that is embarrassment. They must be horrified at what they got us into.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I filed, Michael, a Freedom of Information, the equivalent of a Freedom of Information Act request under Australian rules, and was rebuffed because my request was overly broad. But one of the things that it confirmed, I forget the exact number, but I believe they came back and said they had over 1,000 hits of documents in their files that might comply, and that's too broad for them. So I'm going to revise it and limit it.
Yeah.
But one thing that would be enormously valuable, and we've already gotten this out of one government, we're getting it out of another government, is to find the dates and the amounts and the payer, it would be the person, the entity to whom the money was routed. We're putting together a comprehensive timeline of all that, and that each time that money was routed, let's say from Australia to Papua New Guinea or to Massachusetts or wherever, each instance prior to September 29th, 2009 of any money routed from Australia is a massive felony crime in U.S. Because there was no such entity, as you rightly point out. Then after September 29th, 2009, I would take the position that the successor Clinton Health Access Initiative Health Access Initiative was another fraud. And so you divide your wires up into two different bits. But we're trying to put together a comprehensive report on all this with a view not just to simply writing a book, but of getting this money back, which is something that I think can happen.
I think we might have lost Michael again.
No, okay.
Michael, you there?
It's all right, we'll keep talking.
Yeah, it says poor connection once again. Well, this is the challenge, Charles, with these international productions. We'll give him a moment. I'm sure he'll come back on the line as soon as he's able.
That's great, and he's a real pro to be doing this so early in the morning, his time.
Yeah.
Is that him coming back?
I'm trying him now.
I see. So Michael is gracious to go back over the history. I think he also has a progress report, because I believe there's been some activity since the last time he was on with us. He did, I believe, get together with representatives of the American FBI.
Ooh.
And that was widely reported all over the world in mainstream press. I had been in touch with him, and he was explaining to me that the ground is actually turning in Australia, that the notion that maybe the Australian government might have been duped, the taxpayers duped, We're talking about $100 million. That's a lot of money. People would like to get that money back. It may be that the people who were so embarrassed deserve to be embarrassed and no longer will be as protected as they might have been back in 15-16 when it looked as if Hillary Clinton might be the next president of the United States.
I think we might be getting Michael back now.
Good.
Shows that he was active. Let's see if it can connect.
Good. It is interesting how each time we get to a major point, that's when it
cuts.
It cuts.
Right. And the thing is, I think now he's trying to call me while I call him. All right, let's just wait a second.
There we go.
That's the sound of it not connecting.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for the patience, everyone. We worked through this. It says active now, so he should connect.
Yeah, by way of background, Michael was in, I believe, the Army, the Australian Army, and then he was a police officer, a detective. Then he had his own radio show, and since then he's gotten involved as building up this investigative reporting presence in his site. We've already pointed people to his site. It's very well done, frequently updated, lots of incisive stories on many topics. Let's hope the power comes back or whatever was frustrating him.
Yeah, the little dot is there, meaning that he's back on, but I tried to call him, and then he tried to call me, and now, I don't know. I suppose there's some challenge there. Well, Charles, we can vamp a bit while we're waiting for Michael to rejoin us. I think a lot of people recall that you and I were in Sarajevo last week.
We were?
That
Are you
was
sure?
Good. Wasn't that us? I thought it was us. That was a great show. I think people really enjoyed walking around, seeing historic Sarajevo. We had a lot of viewers from Sarajevo commenting. We had some of the facts and questions. So when Michael is done giving us his presentation, I don't know, are you prepared to address some of those questions?
Sure. I'd like to. I've got quite a few
focused.
slides on the Australian matter, but happy to address any questions.
Well, let's try Michael again. I'm not sure why. Maybe I'll call him. I'm sure he'll start calling. That's the way these sort of phone problems usually work out. I do want to remind everybody who watched and enjoyed us in Sarajevo last week, I really hope that people will become sponsors by going to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. I've had to curtail the practice of announcing where I might go in an effort to gauge audience support, because social engineers have counteracted that by calling the places in advance, telling them lies, and thwarting the trip. So I rely on the generosity of the viewers to help me deal with these massive credit card bills that come out of this international travel. Here's Michael now. There we go. Michael, can you hear us? Michael, have you got us? Hello? Michael, can you hear us? We hear you. Oh, and he's gone.
Yeah, it must be dodgy. Maybe we should send Michael a comment that we'll just do it another time.
Well, if he's ready, we'll try it. Okay. What do you want to say about what Michael's told us so far, Charles?
Well, it's yet another example of, you have to remember in this time frame, this is the Australian Adventures, the MOU was signed by Bill Clinton, I think February 22nd or thereabouts, 2006. Mere months after dopey James Comey and to a certain extent Mueller and to a certain extent Rosenstein had abandoned a 4-year investigation into the Clinton Foundation that should have seen massive defects, fraud, corruption that had been escalating really from the day Bill Clinton left the White House on January 20th, 2001, as he and Doug Band crafted the, quote, post-presidency using the Clinton Foundation as his slush fund. I mean, they should have seen all this. And I think I've mentioned before, my guess is that with regard to all these former presidents that we now have who get Secret Service protection for the balance of their lives, there has to be a protocol that is in the Secret Service, administered by the Treasury Department, that looks and sees, okay, well, Bill Clinton, you know, where was he from January 20th, 2001? Somebody has to know.
Lolita Island.
Well, he's been traveling all over these different places, and somebody in the vaunted FBI and elsewhere should have said, now, wait a minute, why is Bill Clinton going around the world putting his hand out for speaking fees and donations to a foundation that he claims he runs, when the paperwork doesn't show that, during a 4-year period when the FBI was actively, and Department of Justice were actively looking at the Clinton Foundation in theory. Maybe they were actively looking this way, Jason. Let's look really, really hard at this and see. But 4 years is a hell of a long time to look at a foundation that was not legally organized or authorized to do, or operated to do anything outside of Little Rock, to watch as a foundation submitted fictional accounting briefs in the guise of audits, which were obviously non-compliant. I mean, how could it take 48 months for the FBI, Department of Justice, and the IRS not to see this fraud? And then, what pattern was therefore laid down for the fraudsters around the world who watched as we fumbled around and couldn't bring a former president to heel? Probably said, well, okay, if they're not going to do anything about it, let's get Hillary in as president and let's take it to the next level. I mean, it's just such a horrible set of precedents. And surely there must be a record somewhere of decisions not to proceed with the FBI investigation to the full extent back then in 2001 to 5. Later, the period 2009, apparently there was a grand jury, may have been impaneled in New Orleans to look at something. We're not sure what.
Okay.
Gentlemen.
We've got Michael back. Hello, Michael.
Hello. Look, I just have to apologise on behalf of the Kingdom of Thailand and its broadband service providers.
That's all right.
You've revealed your previously undisclosed location.
Oh, dear me. Right, that's it. Off to Malaysia.
So you were saying, Michael, your most damning anecdote has yet to be told. Please let us know what that is.
I think it was the audit report.
Look, it's the audit report in its totality. The fact that the Australian government, at the end of Downer's time, so Downer left government in 2007. By 2010, when we had our leftist government in power, that's our Labor Party, similar to your Democrats, it was crystal clear that the Clinton Foundation was operating with no agreed outcomes, no purpose, doing what it wanted, and often duplicating work that was being paid for by others and charging us for the same work. It was clear to us that was going on, and yet we continued, because of our starstruck ministers, to hand over, tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars that continued right up until 2016, 2017 odd, and in fact arguably continues to this day. I know that Julie Bishop tried to create, she's our former Foreign Affairs Minister, to create the impression that we had ceased funding the Clinton Foundation, but there is an MOU in place that provides for it to be paid up certainly to the end of this year, 2019, 2020. And Charles, I'd be interested to see the fruit of your Freedom of Information application, to see for certain whether or not those payments have ceased. I suspect they have not ceased. The Clinton Foundation and Ira Magazine are very, very effective in finding ways to have unwitting governments parted with their money, and ours has certainly been the most unwitting you can imagine.
So, Michael, the last time you were on, shortly thereafter, I believe there were a lot of news stories about how you had filed a complaint and maybe talked to the FBI. Is it possible for you to bring that story forward to the present?
Look, I would be delighted if Director Ray would pick up the cudgels and take this thing on and get back in touch with me. It's been over a year now that these detailed informations, detailed bases for indictments have been with the FBI. There is, in my view, and I'm a former policeman and I've had other police mates, very senior detectives, go over this, the brief of evidence. There is crystal clear evidence of serious indictable offences, you'd call them felonies in the United States, having been committed by US nationals or persons associated with entities controlled by US nationals, and that's Clinton Foundation and their associates. And the FBI seems reluctant to act. It just amazes me that there's this intransigence, this tremendous inertia when it comes to investigating, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. And I'd like to put something to you right now. Imagine that it wasn't a Trump operative. Imagine it wasn't George Papadopoulos, but that it was a Clinton operative who bumped into Alexander Downer in the bar in London. And this Clinton operative said, "Oh, I've heard that the Russians got dirt on Trump." Do you think that that would have been parlayed into cables that went to the United States that were the trigger for an FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton and her alleged collusion with Russia? Do you think that would have happened? It's beyond belief. Of course it wouldn't have happened. It would not have happened. So there is something terribly, terribly murky, and Trump is right to have asked our current day Prime Minister, with whom he seems to have a tremendously good relationship, he's right to have asked him to assist in the investigation of Downer and what happened to trigger the FBI investigation into Trump on this terribly, terribly trumped up, pardon the pun, allegation that there was collusion between the Trump campaign team and Russia. Because it just beggars belief to think that they would have acted in that, the FBI would have acted in that way if the tables were turned, if it was Hillary. Do you have the same feeling, Charles, that there is an institutional reluctance to investigate the Clintons?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily just the Clintons. I think that what happened here, one of Bill's favorite card games is something called Oh Hell, which is like Hearts. I don't know if you play cards, but it's a game where you don't want to end up with a certain suit. And if you do, if you can alternatively play the game to get all of the bad cards. And that's really what I think Bill Clinton has been doing here. He's gone, since the moment he landed in Washington, D.C., prior to becoming president, there are several books that point out that he was already thinking about his legacy and his presidential library, and he was trying to get things moving, to get a close friend from college days to work in the White House and shape his legacy. So I think this has been a game here for the Clintons that has involved corrupting the Bushes, which might not have been a very difficult thing to do, certainly the Obamas and others, and what the resistance to date in Washington, D.C. by the swamp has been that I think that when you pull the cover off this mess, Republicans, Democrats, independents, and just plain old fraudsters, which I could be repeating myself there, are all going to be exposed by this. And so that they were able, people were able to say, well, you don't want to go there, Chris Wray, because if you go there, we're going to get your friend over here, and back and forth. And so the swamp looked at each other and said, well, this guy Trump will leave eventually. We'll just pretend, go through the motions, and eventually this thing will go away. I think Trump at this stage is, and actually well before today, has decided that he's going to pull the plug on this. And I think some big hammers are about to drop, I hope.
Well, he has the agreement of our Prime Minister to assist him in doing that. And whilst our Prime Minister has said, look, there is no allegation that Australia has acted improperly here, we're just passing on information for a US investigation into a US matter that involves US politics. I think that once they commence that investigation, as you know, scope creep is likely to come in. And my fervent hope, and the lobbying effort that I'm engaged in here in Australia, is that the Clinton Foundation frauds are brought into the ambit of the investigation that Trump has the Australian Prime Minister's agreement we will cooperate on.
That would be great. But so when you sent your complaint in, there was no meeting, there was no follow-up meeting, nothing?
Nope. I was asked to submit my information by former FBI agents, special agents, people who worked in the FBI who are familiar with these matters. And that resulted in the way that I crafted the submissions and the very specific nature of the offences that I alleged took place. Now, that, to me, that is quite alarming information. There's a series of offences involving named US citizens. They're transnational offences. They clearly fall within the ambit of the FBI so far as its investigative authority is concerned, and it's just dead stop. No, not so much as the courtesy of it. Look, we've looked at it and we've decided to take it no further. Just dead stop, nothing. It's similar to the response that I've received in Australia. Stonewalling, and I suspect, Charles, that you're right in that the scope of people in our country, it'll be both political parties. So Downer is from our Conservative Party. I know, by the by, that in the United States, he's routinely referred to as an Australian diplomat. Well, that's a small part of his career. The bulk of his career was as a Conservative or equivalent Republican, to your Republican Party, politician and minister in government here in Australia. And for a short time, he was the leader of our Conservative or right-wing political party. So the idea that Downer is part of a left-wing conspiracy against Trump, I think takes it too far. I don't think that is at all the case so far as Downer is concerned. I think that's a little bit zany, that theory. He's a buffoon. He was smitten by the Clintons. He was likely to favour the Clintons just on the basis, in my assessment, of his personal history with them. And I think he is open to huge embarrassment when his mismanagement of the funding that we provided to the Clintons is ultimately revealed.
So Mikey, one interesting thing I've noticed, and it may just be not a true fact, but I've noticed that it seems to me Australians travel more. You have to travel more because you're so far away from everything. And a logical project to have gotten involved with at this early period would have been Unitate, yet Australia is not part of Unitate. Do you know whether there was a back and forth on that whether diligence was done on Unitate and Australia turned it down, or... It just
No. I'm not a government insider. I wouldn't be privy to that, and I've not researched it. I'll have a look at it. I couldn't give you a direct answer on it, but I would say this: that our public stance on foreign affairs and funding, aid funding, development funding, has been a focus on our region, on the Asia Pacific, and the Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea. All of the small little countries through the Asia Pacific, as far back as 2006 and certainly now, have tremendous strategic importance to us, and I would suggest to the United States as well, and that is because of China and because of Chinese overt efforts at funding and gaining influence throughout the region. Now, in that regard, the Clintons have a hell of a lot to answer for, particularly in Papua New Guinea. I don't want to digress too much, but I think that there is a number of cables that the US...
Every time.
That sounded like the sound of him being cut right off, didn't it?
Yeah, every time we get to something juicy, it gets cut off. I hope we get him back, because I want to ask him, and I'll brief the audience while we're waiting for Michael, that one of the very odd things I noticed about this whole Australian Clinton Foundation thing is that one of the countries they chose to donate money to was China. Now, why would Australia in 2006, 7, 8, and afterwards need to give money for projects in China? By then,
free iPhones.
Well, but by then China was a wealthy country.
Right. Yeah, none of it makes any sense, Charles. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that when we hear Trump asking Ukraine to investigate the Biden's activity, and then now someone's come out with a story that apparently Nancy Pelosi's son is on the board of an energy company in Ukraine. I think Trump is tapping into the piggy bank there. And,
that's right.
And it just seems like these bureaucrats in government, who we have all been conditioned to think like, that's politics, they're just stealing money like crazy. So all of these deals are probably some complicated way to steal money that you're going to be way better equipped to figure out than me, or probably almost anybody watching.
Well, we'll go through some of that in a little bit here. I don't know what we should do with Michael, because I hate to keep him up.
Yeah. Well, we'll just ask him one more try if you're up for it.
Yeah.
Because it is a good conversation. I know that
he's fantastic.
Augie Doggy is saying the show... This shows you're right over the target.
Well, yeah, I think that is true, and it was interesting. We'll digress a little bit here. That Steve Doocy, Peter Doocy, Steve Doocy's son, Fox and Friends co-host son, got the the finger jab response out of Biden, the first one, and then some young lady, I don't know which media outfit she's from, she got the finger jab from Biden. You know, that when you ask a question and politicians start doing that, you know you've got them.
You know, that's true, because that's sort of what Alan Dershowitz was doing, and then Kevin Shipp sent me an email saying that's a sign, that aggressive kind of answer is a sign of lying.
Yeah, as you know, when you get into a place and somebody gets mad at you to try to shut you up, you know right away. They may as well just say, "I'd like to confess to this crime now because I'm going to get really mad, and it's obvious that I'm guilty, and I'm trying to scare you off."
Well, the other thing I find weird is that, you know, like when somebody accuses me of lying about something that I know I'm not lying about, that kind of makes me a little mad. So when I'm speaking to somebody else about something that I know they're lying about and they're not getting mad, that's also a little bit, anytime the emotional response is inconsistent with what you would expect it to be, it's at least cause for suspicion. So it says active, but yet we're not able to reach him. So probably some kind of internet problem there. In Thailand, you know, we've heard social engineers tell us about the problems with the internet in Thailand. They do have it, and it maybe is not good for streaming, but it eventually works. I've tested it myself.
Right. Yeah. Good.
Well, gee, I guess we should just carry on, Charles, with the regular show, because I don't know if we're going to get Michael back here.
Sure. Why don't we go? We'll try on a few pages of the slides. If he comes back, there are places where we could weave him back in.
Sure.
I kind of anticipated this, and it is very, very early in the morning there. So another plan would be for him to hit the pillow. But
right. And the slides, yes, we've got that right here.
Good. So great poster. And
I think he's just responded saying something. Sorry.
It's all right. We'll get to the bottom of this in a second.
Yep. While we're waiting for Michael to decide.
Sure, I'll just take people through the slides.
He's calling right now, Charles.
Okay.
Okay, we're still with you, Michael. Can you hear us?
And also with you.
And peace be with you. Well, we'll just keep you, if it's all right, for a few more minutes because it's so early there, and thank you for bearing up with all the internet gremlins.
I'm terribly sorry about it.
It's all right. This happens. So you were giving us the update. You were saying that the FBI is doing nothing. You may remember, Michael. I don't know.
I don't. Hang on a sec. I don't know that they're doing nothing. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you that they are not communicating back with me.
Okay.
And that's why I republished and resent essentially a synopsis of the brief to Ray in the last week, in the hope that with the president having directed that. The matter of how this false collusion investigation was commenced, the false allegations of collusion between his campaign and the Russians, how that Mueller inquiry, was commenced, and the fact that the Australian government has, at the highest level, that is through our head of government, the Prime Minister, agreed to support that Trump investigation. I think that changed circumstance, the time was right for me to follow up again with the information that I put before the FBI in relation to the Clinton Foundation's crimes and the it is ineptitude, but the fact that Australian officials were deceived by the Clinton Foundation, I think that is part of the remit of what your president, has asked to be investigated by the FBI now.
That's excellent news, Michael. That's excellent. I think, people underestimate Trump, and of course there are things that could happen to him. We hope they don't happen to him, but this man is a fighter. He's working for free. He's not taking a salary, and he's been through withering criticism before, and he gets big projects done. I think on this one he has the law on his side. He is technically the law. At least his administration is the one in charge of enforcing, taking care that all the laws be faithfully executed. So. He actually sits above Barr in our system as the top legal officer. He's got the substance on his side, the facts on his side, and I think there is a growing sense in our country. I don't know what it's like in Australia. I've never been there, Michael, but there's a sense in this country that people who work in the private sector in real jobs are sick and tired of this cronyism, of this waste. It's a pox on both parties, all established politicians. Enough of this crap. You know, we're spending in this country, Michael, $6.5 trillion a year on government. $6.5 trillion.
Yep.
You know, and we don't even get a T-shirt for that.
The sentiment that you expressed is identical to the sentiment that propelled our Conservative Party back into a most unexpected electoral win several months ago. And our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, he heads our Conservative Party, the Liberal Party, capital L Liberal Party. It was entirely unexpected by the pundits, by the chattering class, you know, the Chardonnay set, that he would be re-elected, and he was. It was a very significant electoral win, and the cause of it is, I think, disaffection amongst people that feel that they're outsiders. And you gave that synopsis of Trump and his track record of delivering big projects and determination, etc., etc. I think even more importantly, a more important feature of Trump's makeup is that he is an outsider, and he absolutely does not give a rat's about being an outsider and appealing to, you know, the insider, the Beltway type of set. He manifestly opposite. He agonises them overtly, and I think that is probably the greatest cause for optimism in him bringing to fruition, bringing to conclusion investigations of these pretty obvious corruptions of your system and our system. And it's the fact of his outsider nature and not wanting to be an insider and not wanting to appeal to the media types and the corporate types, the Wall Street types and the political class. The fact of him just not giving a toss about that, that's the single element that makes me most optimistic that there is light at the end of the tunnel and that these corrupt activities ultimately, you know, the people who were involved in them will face justice. I hope I'm right, Charles.
I think you are, Michael, and thanks for the long-standing fight and the efforts that you're pursuing, not simply on the Clinton Foundation, but in other areas where you're trying to make sure that law and order rules and injustices don't. Really appreciate the fact that you joined us literally in the middle of the night to do this. But
with the broadband gods.
Do you have any final thoughts, Michael?
Yeah, I think that the relationship between America and Australia is very strong, and the affinity between our people is even stronger. And, you know, we've got the same values, the same cultural background, and I think Trump gets that. And I think it was quite significant that he's only put on 2 state dinners, 2 state functions. One was for Macron, which I didn't really understand all that well, but the other was for our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison. And from our perspective in Australia, to see the pomp and ceremony and the extent to which Trump went out of his way to welcome Scott a couple of weeks ago, and that combined with the President officially asking our head of government, Scott Morrison, to assist in the investigation of this allegation against him of collusion with the Russians, in which Downer is obviously involved, I think, you know, it just makes me very, very optimistic that the mood is right, the time is right, and that your long-standing fight, my long-standing fight to see justice done in relation to the Clintons may well lead to a successful outcome.
Let's hope so, sir, and I hope you have a nice, what's left of your evening. I hope you can sleep late tomorrow and enjoy what you're doing, and let's stay in close touch.
Yeah, and I must get over to New York, Charles, and we'll do it face-to-face.
I look forward to it.
Okay, mate.
Thanks so much, Michael.
All the best. You too, Jace.
Thank you, Michael. Great having you on again.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
No worries. Yep, you too. Bye-bye.
Well, that was great. You know, it's interesting for me, Charles, because from day to day, depending on who the guest is, I either get, oh, Trump is doing nothing and he's part of the swamp, or he's our only hope. And
right.
It's kind of like a emotional ping pong game, because these are all such qualified individuals who are experts in their area, very well researched. So there's a lot of unknowns that we still wait to find the answer to.
That's absolutely true. Well, why don't we do have a presentation to go through. It's a little, I'll take it rather quickly, even though it's about, I think, 12 slides here. We're delighted that we were able to get Michael back into the frame to give you his update. Those of you who joined the show earlier have had that update. We're going to take you through some links to additional information. People complain sometimes, seldom successfully with me, that there's not enough detail, but we will point you to places where you can get a lot of detail. And really, at this, we riff on Mad Max here, the movie that I gather was filmed in Australia, and instead call him Mad Alex. And this fellow, Alexander Downer, he's like Zelig. I mean, he's everywhere. He's there in February 2006 with Bill Clinton, signing Australia up to give money to a foundation that doesn't exist when it's not run by Bill Clinton. And he's there yet again at some wine bar in London, trying to trap, and maybe successfully for a moment, trapping George Papadopoulos.
Was he wearing the high heels?
No.
I mean, this is ridiculous.
Maybe later when he got home.
Charles, this is pretty unheard of, right? I mean, it's one thing to have a ridiculous painting of Bill Clinton in high heels, but here's the guy actually in high heels. We had another image, that's not it, another image of him somewhere here in dress. I mean, what is going on? He's wearing a bustier. It's quite bizarre.
Yeah, I know I don't like that picture. Let's
You don't like that picture?
No,
Sorry,
no.
Charles.
Not at all.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, let's get rid of
Make
that.
it go away.
Thank you. So we didn't want it to say where Michael was. We won't repeat what he did say on the off chance that no one heard it. But he is.
Luckily, it wasn't recorded and broadcast to over 1,000 people.
Right. He was joining us really early in the morning from Asia, and really appreciate that. I want to hit hard right at the outset on the first page here, the idea, the suggestion from Nancy Pelosi and the talking deads or heads or whatever you want to call them in the mainstream press, that it is potentially impeachable for Trump to contact these governments and say, hey, we want to know what happened in 2016. How do you learn from your mistakes if you don't examine them? I mean, it absolutely falls within his purview. We have the very same people who were pounding the table in May of 2017 for the special counsel, suggesting that Mueller should have the widest latitude possible to go all over the place, to look at everything back to Michael Cohen, to Manafort, going tax cases to Cyprus, to Malta, and all over the place. Those same people who demanded that Mueller have unchecked power are now saying that it's somehow wrong for Trump to go back over ground after Mueller has issued a report saying there was no Russian collusion, that rose to the level of something that should be prosecuted. Collusion, of course, not being a crime. And there are indeed legitimate, with each passing day, there are more and more legitimate questions that need to be asked and answered concerning how that inquiry came to light. And when did the investigation of candidates begin? Did it begin in 2016? Did it begin before that? Under whose direction? With what financial resources? These are the types of questions from the very beginning, Jason, with you. I have always said, by all means, let us have a real investigation here. Let's not limit it just to Trump, and let's not limit it just to Russia. Let's not even limit it just to foreign actors. What malfeasance was going on here by the Republican Party, by the Democratic Party, by billionaires and zillionaires and paupers and whatever, to conspire to influence this election in 2016, and then to propel a resistance, as seems to be propelled by lots of shadow characters, including not-for-profit organizations, charities that are not supposed to be engaged in partisan political activities, let alone trying to overthrow the president of the duly elected president of the United States via a charity that avails itself of not having to pay taxes on its, quote, income, if it has any income, being able to build up investment profits if it's a large charity like Gates or Soros without paying taxes, and then being able to offer donors the valuable benefit of contributing money to a supposed public charity, which the Clinton Foundation claims to be, being able to write off 50% of your income as opposed to 30% if you're a private foundation. You know, why should we allow all that to continue when it sure seems to me that the Clinton cabal, the crooked Clinton crime network, operating in guise of charities with allied co-conspirators, has been doing its level best to rig every election. You know, I don't think Bill Clinton's initial election was rigged, although maybe in 1992.
Hell yes.
Well, you think he brought in Ross
I think
Perot?
it was, no. Well, I mean, look, I don't think that rigging is the same as having total control. I think that they rigged it by having George H.W. Bush be one choice and Bill Clinton be the other choice, because whoever gets elected, you got a CIA cocaine kingpin in there who's got so much dirt on everybody else that they're all on the same crew. I think Ross Perot coming in was the part that they were like, get him the hell out of here. He was the Trump of that time. Yeah. Except he had nice little, cards and PowerPoint presentations before PowerPoint existed. You want to keep on slow dancing.
But the big thing here, and we're seeing it, you heard Michael mention that Alexander Downer's daughter is now being positioned for politics. Downer's father, I think, and grandfather was involved in politics. The big problem we have here, we had it really, making a small attempted joke here, we had it in 1774 to 1776, this whole
dynasties,
king thing, this whole letting kings run countries and creating these dynasties, these modern political dynasties who claim that they're serving every one of us, when in reality they're helping themselves to big, first, second, third, fourth, fifth helpings. Yeah, here we go.
I mean, that's absurd, Charles. He looks just like Andrew McCabe, doesn't he?
Yeah, I just am speechless. But you have the Bushes, you have the Clintons, you have, who knows, we may have the Obamas, we have the Pelosi's, you have all these families, McCain's, who believe that it's okay to go down this track of, on the one hand, holding elective office, on the other hand, maybe having a foundation, hoping that a crooked accountant doesn't look too carefully at where all the money goes, hoping that nobody notices that the large portions of donations and money that was supposed to go to worthy causes ends up instead financing lifestyles and political campaigns, and everyone's in on the game, so nobody does anything about it. So this Downer character, I think I am encouraged that the Prime Minister is going to cooperate with the Trump administration. We've done this slightly out of order today to accommodate Michael, but just to remind folks, I hope your subscribership is growing again, and that this is a different sort of approach. We've been at this now for since June of 2017. We've done quite a few episodes, and it's not simply that we're doing episodes. We're interacting with the Michael Smiths and his group of followers, and our followers are growing, the activities are growing, people are beginning to file complaints around the world, in more and more places around the world. They're cross-collaborating with one another. And this is really not simply we're telling you the truth kind of episode. This is an effort where we're trying to galvanize individuals who might not otherwise want to participate in making sure that the swamp gets drained. We're trying to galvanize interest in really stepping up to the plate and making plain to your friends, to your associates, to politicians, to those who could do something about it, that no, this corruption has run its course. We're not down with this corruption. We're not down with taking some nitwit, Hunter Biden, and say, oh yeah, you know nothing about nothing, and so we're going to give you $1.5 billion from China. Why not? I mean, that's just so far over the top. And for Biden now to be saying there's nothing there. Trump is the problem.
He's bleeding out the eyes when he starts shouting at people.
I mean, it's sad. It really is sad. So today, though, is, I guess, our 179th episode. I think there's more coming, perhaps, Jason.
Oh, well, Charles, a lot of people really enjoyed this road trip episode in Sarajevo, and we're asking for even more material. Now, there is some additional stuff that I shot that wasn't directly a part of our tour that day. So I'm thinking about putting together some supplemental behind-the-scenes material and making it available to our sponsors. I should say to sponsors of Crowdsource the Truth. Charles volunteers his time to do this show and isn't financially compensated, but for people who do watch the show, it can't happen without your sponsorship. So if people watch and enjoy even only the free shows on Crowdsource the Truth, I hope they'll visit subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become sponsors. There's 84,700 subscribers to the main YouTube channel, Charles, and we've got over 1,700 people watching us right now, which is actually more than the total sponsorship of Crowdsource the Truth. So if you're watching right now and you're not a sponsor, but you're a regular viewer of the show, What are you waiting for? Get over there. Even for $2 a month, $5 a month, it really helps the show keep going. And I put a lot of extra material there for people who are sponsors. We'll have a behind the scenes and supplemental Sarajevo segment coming very soon.
Yeah, that's important because I think, particularly as we step up into the primaries and then the general election next year, I know that I personally, for various reasons, have to do a lot of travel. Jason, I know, likes to travel. I don't particularly like to travel anymore, but I have to do it. So with support, Jason will be better able, I think, to go on some of these trips. Absolutely. And we certainly enjoy doing them. It was a real treat to be with you there in Sarajevo, and I know there are many other countries we want to go to, including, in my case, Russia, places in Africa, Haiti, many other places.
And they are not cheap, Charles. You know, the other thing that we should remind people of, Charles, is that they can communicate with you directly via Twitter as long as the messages are not stupid. They can send you a direct message by finding you there at Charles Ortel. They can send messages to Michael Smith, MP Smith News, and they can send messages to me through Twitter. Really, the best way is going to be email. People can email me on truth@crowdsourcethetruth.org.
Yeah, and I have to say I appreciate the direct messages and emails that I get. It's overwhelmingly constructive. Occasionally I get people who are bothersome, but it really is a pleasure, and please feel free to reach out to me. The adage on a first contact that less is more should be listened to carefully. I get a deluge of information on a daily basis, and I am not going to sit there and respond to a 20-page list of questions and ideas, and this I can't do it. Well, but a short one, I will do.
Yeah, and nor should people send unidentified links, because those are just traps for hacking. So be very specific about what's contained in the link if you even want to hope of somebody looking at it.
So we weren't really sure how the connection with Michael Smith would work, so we want to give some follow-up information. We have it at the ready. We've talked to you about his background. You can contact him. That's on his site. We have links to the last appearance that he did, which was early in January of 2018. And literally following his appearance, there must have been 50 articles around the world focusing in on what Michael Smith was doing, including the Zero Hedge report, which is linked there for people to refresh their memories if they weren't following the stuff last year. If you go into this one link here, Jason, this is what happens when you search his site for Clinton Foundation stories. Your computer gets bombed. No, there's quite a there are pages and pages and pages in here, people could go through this in the past. I've also in the past provided a shorter summary in previous slideshows to the specific links, link by link by link, of all Michael Smith stories, and I think there are at least 50 of them, if not more. So, and he does very, very thorough work. It's a pleasure I've got to know him just really on the internet, and I've known him now since 2016. He gets around, he interacts with lots of people around the world, and he's very well regarded, I think with reason. Yeah, he's got quite a resume. Yeah. So if we get into the slide again, just a quick second on the business model that we're going to be covering at the base here. What we're talking about here, you want to reach out to a former police detective, Michael Smith, to catch a charity thief. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. You have the common variety cat burglar who goes into apartments and houses and restaurants and whatever and steals. Charity thieves are a special brand of felon. These are people who prey upon the weakest of the weak, who think that they get away with it, who know that they will get away, who know that once they're caught, as Michael was describing in the case of Australia, there's an embarrassment factor to stand up and say, you know what, Australian government gave $100 million to an epic charity fraud, not once. We started in 2006, so we're doing it through 2020, because, what the hell, once you're caught, a thief has got a thief. And really, if you look at this is just addressing, this construct here is just addressing the Clinton Foundation case with Australia. But you have unsuspected taxpayers in Australia and the US on the left. You have corrupt multinationals, not just the World Bank and the IFC and Unitaid and other things like that, but multinational corporations, multinational charities, multinational banks, multinational investment firms. You have crooked accountants who are willing to put their name on anything for a small fee, just so they can be close to this messing about. And then you have corrupt countries who can and will be able for many, many decades to come to stand up and say, hi, I'm the president of Papua New Guinea, we're in trouble, we need money. And do-gooders from all these colleges around the world, professors will say, oh, we got to give the UN. The UN's got to give them $20 million. It's only $20 million. Give it to Papua New Guinea. Give it to Indonesia. Give it here. Give it there. And so the fraudsters know that you could just insert yourself in the middle with the Clinton crime family and other like-minded crime families. And what you do is you stand in front of the aid streams that are going to go to Papua New Guinea and Indonesia and Sub-Saharan Africa and elsewhere. For as long as there's a modern economy, it is likely that countries around the world are going to have a case to be made for rich folks to give them money. If it's not development aid, it'll be something like climate change, it'll be some other argument that sounds sweet-smelling and makes all kinds of sense in theory to the people who can waste your money with no oversight. But the simple fact is there's a gigantic market, addressable market available for charity thieves. And we've been on a hunt for those charity thieves. We're going to be on a continuing hunt for them. And much like, I remember when I cut my teeth in banking in the early 80s, there were some very large insider trading scandals back then. And I would have thought that when you watch what happened to Ivan Boesky and all these people,
Ivan Boesky,
that you would say, insider trading is a thing that I don't want to do.
Right.
But even today, I'm sure we'll wake up in the press tomorrow morning, there'll be probably a story about a new insider trading case. Similarly, people are always going to get the dumb idea that it's a good thing to stand up and steal from a charity. And this case, where former presidents and prime ministers around the world got involved with something that was supposed to only operate in Little Rock and managed to send it billions and billions of unchecked dollars, and then didn't ask any questions. And people are saying it's unfair to ask Biden questions about his son. Why is it unfair to ask questions about the Clintons? I mean, here were the Clintons. They were technically bankrupt when he was president. Their assets were far less than their liabilities. And now today they're worth who knows how many $100 million. And they've been operating either as government, quote, servants, senator, secretary of state, or operating a charity. And nobody's standing and saying, wait a minute, we have a charity that was supposed to be operating in Little Rock. We have a bankrupt family that's now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And we can't look at that. We've got to check and see whether there's collusion involving, the Trump family.
They're writing a lot of books, Charles. People read books. Was Ivan Boesky doing something with TWA? What was that?
That was Carl Icahn was doing
Carl
stuff.
Icahn. I remember Ivan Boesky with the insider trading. But I mean, it all comes back to this concept that crime doesn't pay. That's an idiotic statement, because obviously it does, or crime would have, if it didn't pay, it would have gone out of business long ago. So somebody's getting paid.
Well, and if you think about it, I mean, in the for-profit world, the legitimate for-profit world, leaving aside, loan sharking, drug dealing, things like that, I mean, but the world that's in theory lawful, the players in that world, it's not like they say, oh yeah, Jason, you can have this $10 million film opportunity. I don't need it. It's not like it's a bunch of Chelsea Clintons in the for-profit world who say, it's beneath me to make that extra penny a share so my shareholders will be happy. Right. Bullshit. I mean, people in the private sector are scheming, doing everything they can. And it's a hotly competitive world. And in consequence, the margins, the profit margins, the cash margins in the for-profit world are shrinking and shrinking. The opportunity to grow your revenues, evidence would seem to suggest that's not happening as much as it used to. Put that world over here with all these people, fighting one another, GE's fighting Siemens and Ford's fighting General Motors and all that kind of stuff, and then go over into la-la land and charity land where nobody cares. You got all these people, Australia's going to give $100 million to a foundation that doesn't technically exist. Norway will do the same thing. Unitaid will do the same thing. Now we've got Obama, the latest former president, creates a foundation that, with a straight face, he says, I'm creating my foundation under a statute that says the foundation has to house the papers of my presidency, only I'm not going to do that. but give me money anyway. And they say, sure. You know,
don't.
Chicago, there are no big buildings in Chicago. There's no problem with, pollution in Chicago. Sure, put up a $500 million building to house nothing.
And don't hire any of the local people who are struggling economically.
Why not? Why would you do that?
They'd rather kick them out.
Right, exactly. So we're going to fly through this page, but Peter Schweitzer, who really actually, I don't give him enough credit. I mean, it was he and Jerry Corsi actually who got me involved in the very beginning, thinking that this Clinton Foundation would be something to study carefully. And Peter is a level-headed guy. He's now again on Fox. I think he's got a new book coming out, or just came out. But he is absolutely correct to say, now wait a minute, you don't say that just because somebody's a political candidate, suddenly they get a pass from any allegations of corruption. Then we'd have even more criminals running for office, right?
If that were possible.
Right? So the person putting this WeWorks thing that's blowing up, I think that's another gigantic scam. I haven't looked at it closely, but I mean, so now the analogy would be, why doesn't he run for president? If that thing's going to go up.
Save his whole
right, exactly.
IPO problem. Exactly. They have one right over here, right around the corner.
I don't doubt it. I mean, but so clearly, what the lamestream press does not want to get is that Biden, the countries where Biden's son, Hunter, got involved, and I believe Biden's brother is also involved. His name has not yet been dragged through the mud as it should be. But the countries that Hunter Biden decided to get involved in business with no qualifications to speak of are the countries that Joe Biden had personal point on within the administration. I mean, Barack Obama did go out of his way to actually get Biden involved in things. He made him, you're in charge of our whole of government. They love to talk about a whole of government approach. Figure out what we should do in Ukraine, whole of government, figure out what we should do in China. That's Biden's bailiwick. And suddenly, along on the trip, comes little Hunter in short pants and those ridiculous patent leather shoes, although that's not what he was wearing. Goes on the plane, and next thing you know, Ukraine puts him on the board, and the Chinese give the guy $1.5 billion. I mean, I don't know of any straight deal that has ever occurred where somebody with no qualifications gets a check for $1.5 billion, other than perhaps that woman. What's that woman who went to prison or is going to go to prison?
I don't know.
It's the medical fraud out there in the West.
Theranos.
Theranos, she got a thing valued up at around $13 billion.
To be fair, Charles, Hunter Biden doesn't have zero qualifications. He seems to be a huge expert in all the different ways you can consume cocaine.
That's true. Try and father children.
So, right. Having sex with his dead brother's wife. The guy's got a lot of skills.
Yeah, actually, as you think about it, if you were trying to, I mean, you have the experience in Hollywood, but if you were trying to get a movie shot where you cast the vice president's son with Hunter Biden's actual, resume that he went to Yale Law School,
no one would believe it.
That you couldn't shoot the movie.
Yeah.
Probably. I mean, I suppose you could find someone dumb enough to write you a check for $100 million to do the movie. Maybe you get it done, but
I mean, if you're trying to write a movie where you had the most despicable character possible that the audience will absolutely not have any sympathy for, it's amazing that people aren't more up in arms about this. Virtually nothing has been said outside of Fox News and you and I and the people that we know. Nobody cares.
Yeah.
Do all the blow you want, take all the money.
That's right. Hookers and blow.
Whatever.
Yeah. But I continue my effort. There's at least one link, if not two. There's one link here to Katya Blainova's latest piece. I think with her, I've done over 100 different interviews.
Here's this guy.
Who? Oh yeah, Chucky.
Chuck Schumer.
Chuck E. Cheese.
He's been kind of quiet lately, right?
He has been quiet. But
why is that?
I don't know. But well, because in the Senate, he's got no power. Anyway, this is yet another example of Katrina sending me questions alongside this person who goes by an alias Technofog, who does, I think, excellent work. Well, Katya does, and Technofog does as well. But this approach here, the precedents that are being set here by the Democrats are so diabolically bad for them, including the likelihood that as we proceed to delve into what's really going on in Ukraine and China and elsewhere, and in particular into Skolkovo and Russia and the Clintons' involvement with all that, we're going to very quickly discover that there were a lot of Obama administration and Bush administration and former Bill Clinton administration people getting things of value, which is the basis to try to go after Trump, getting things of value from a foreign government during a campaign. You're going to tell me that the person who was pioneering this idea of Lincoln bedroom coffees had Johnny Chung and all those other people, Mokhtar Riyadi in '96 and 2000.
Stealing the furniture.
Stealing the furniture. But that person who, for an large Indonesian tycoon that had interest in gigantic copper stuff, Clinton at the last minute says, oh, okay, this copper reserve in the United States that could be competitive, we'll just take that off the market by making a gigantic national park. You're going to tell me that that happened when Bill was president?
To not be competitive with China?
Indonesia. So wow. If you really want to go back, as I think we should go back actually, and as I suggest in some other articles with Sputnik and other appearances, I think it's high time we went back and said, all right, maybe we need to understand why people write $100,000 after-tax checks to politicians, and maybe we should just simply take the biggest donors and then re-examine every deal that they've done since they wrote the check to the various politicians and see if there isn't a connection between why somebody would write a $100,000 check and then walk away with a $100 million private contract. I mean, I think that might be a useful exercise.
Someone somewhere has an actuary figuring out how much less it would cost to kill you and I.
That's right. Right. So then we have this conservative...
Sorry, you and me.
That's all right.
I'm going to get yelled at.
Neither one of us. But anyway, the conservative treehouse, Sundance, has another great story here, as they really do fantastic, regularly good work.
Whoops, what's that?
That's just the story getting bigger. But basically, what they're trying to do, is, in the words of this author here, I don't know who Sundance is, they're Grubering the American public. Because the fact is that the House of Representatives has no authority whatsoever to issue a technical subpoena at this point. There has been no vote in the House setting up a basis where the House could issue these type of subpoenas. And people need to remember that the House of Representatives is not a prosecutorial body. To prosecute somebody would have to work with the Justice Department. And so they're setting up this ruse where, beginning as they did around October 4th, they had hoped to move at light speed to confuse the public. And literally, to confuse the public.
I was just thinking of ludicrous speed from Spaceballs. That's the speed they're moving at.
Yeah, ludicrous speed. To go down, arms waving or whatever, and make all these accusations. And what they seem to forget is that people make false and unfair allegations. Jesse Smollett,
right.
The ones against Kavanaugh, there are many. And that's why we have a judicial system where you have a right to defend yourself, you have a right to face your accuser. And here, the very same people who were asking for the justice to be fair, the scales of justice to be balanced, bend over for the little guy, etc., give people a chance. These same people are trying to railroad in a coordinated fashion. It turns out the second whistleblower who is now coming forward is represented by the same lawyer as the first. I mean, that's not at all suspicious. I mean, the fact that exactly the same guy. That case didn't work. Mark it up. Let's bring another whistleblower. Is your name whistleblower? Yeah, let's use you.
Well, it's almost as if they just, figure out what is the problem with the first thing and okay, let's get somebody else queued up who eliminate that problem.
Right, exactly. And then
this 116th Congress, Charles, it's kind of like, they're just making things up. They're not even making laws. They're just acting a certain way and hoping everybody doesn't notice that they have no authority to do what they're doing.
Yeah, it's especially shameful coming on the heels of what happened with Mueller. I mean, we're supposed to give Mueller the benefit of the doubt. We're supposed to, this guy, he's a Republican, he's nonpartisan, he's a war hero, he's this, he's that. And now we've got shifty Adam Schiff.
Whoops.
Sorry. That was an unintentional slip, believe it or not. Anyway, this is a good and long article for people to read if we go back into the slides. It gives you some sense of the background. Now, as if on cue, I have actually never written an op-ed for the San Francisco Chronicle, but I don't think you call them up and say, hey, I'm Charles Ortel and I want to have my thing in the paper on Sunday morning or whatever. Look at who writes this article. If we hit this,
Willie Brown.
Willie Brown, right? Who should run against Trump? How about Hillary Clinton? Now, this happened completely by accident. I mean, the fact that the assault against Biden is being pitched by the Clintons as this is a horrible thing that Donald Trump has done, when in reality, it clears some of the ground for Hillary Clinton. And it's likely, and I think we need to ask the question, how many of these allegations that now surface were known in the 15-16 cycle, and might the presence of these allegations that are surfacing now explain why Joe Biden didn't run in the first place in 2015 and 16, and why Obama didn't endorse him. Right. So this thing against Biden is, I would argue, it's definitely beneficial to Hillary Clinton, assuming she is as foolish as I believe she is, believing that it makes any sense to try again to become the 3-time loser that she already is, should she run again. But here's Willie Brown, who I believe it's open knowledge that Kamala Harris began her political career, let's just put it delicately, in association with Willie Brown. So she can't be terribly happy that here's Willie Brown putting the San Francisco Chronicle piece in, suggesting, well, why doesn't Hillary run? Just as Biden's faltering, we have, of course, and it's sad that Bernie Sanders had a heart attack last week, and then we have, I don't know, Jason, if you follow this, but we don't have a link on it, but a lot of attention is being given to Elizabeth Warren's false claim now that the reason she didn't continue with her career as a special education teacher was that she was pregnant, and her principal suggested that she shouldn't come back because she was pregnant. Huh. There's now a TV video that I saw multiple channels this morning of Elizabeth Warren dressed in her fake Indian haircut, with the hair parted in the middle. She didn't go so far as to wear moccasins and a suede dress and beaded thing around her. And wear a papoose.
But the real reason she wasn't hired as a teacher, too stupid.
She didn't have the qualifications. She had to have these advanced degrees. And so
stupid.
Yeah, exactly. So we talked about the second whistleblower. We've talked about the fact that it's supposedly, just by accident, this second whistleblower is also being represented by a Clinton-connected lawyer. And, Jason, what you're doing here with Crowdsource the Truth is you're not technically a whistleblower in the sense that you're not providing information from your own job or your own experience to shake things up, but you are a forum. You've developed quite a forum to look at scandals around the world, scandals of all varieties, and people who are in the center of scandals where things are not going properly and who do have a remaining moral compass need to be encouraged to come out and function lawfully as whistleblowers, not as political assassins.
And not to this guy.
Exactly. And I think, when we get back into it, we're going to discover that the same lawyer, Mark Elias, or Elias, however you pronounce his name.
Isn't this Mark Zaid?
I know, I'm talking about somebody else. Mark Elias, who was figured so closely in the Hillary Clinton, in my view, rigging the primaries, rigging the general election, getting involved with the Steele dossier and all that. There's a bunch of fixers in Washington, D.C. Oh, yeah. A limited number of these lawyers who are tacticians. They're hired guns. They appear to have no moral compass, and they're all in for the Democrats. So they're trying to get Trumpy. We've done a show actually called Get Trumpy. They're at it again. And let's see, by all means, let's see what the second whistleblowers, if there's another whistleblower, great. Let's see what they all have to say. But as Ted Cruz, rightfully pointed out, let's flip the switch. Where are the whistleblowers that can now tell us about Fast and Furious? It can tell us what really happened.
They're all dead or in jail.
Right. Right. But whistleblowing is a function that really deserves support.
But let me ask you this, Charles, because this is a bit of a unique episode. This all came down sort of the day before you left for Sarajevo, and we didn't really get a chance to fully address the whole whistleblower. They blow the whistle all they want. Trump didn't say anything that was outside the scope of what we would want a sitting president to do. Speak to the foreign leader of another country where the previous administration was seemingly involved in crimes. It wasn't like he told them to make up some story about Hunter Biden pissing on a bed. He said, what's the deal with this coke addict making all this money from an energy company that his father was overseeing when he was vice president?
I know, it's totally legitimate. And it's just, of course...
Bring all the whistleblowers you got.
Right, exactly. So if we jump here to this thing, there is a new FBI, new part, the 36th part on the continuing investigation into Hillary R. Clinton mishandling of classified information. Now this, we've been through, I haven't had a chance to go through this one, we'll probably save this for next week, but just to alert people, here's another 165 pages
Wow.
of information. And it sure looks to me as if there is a there in the mishandling of classified information. When we had dopey James Comey try to say that there's no motivation for Hillary Clinton, there's no intent, no corrupt intent here for housing 100% of your communications to Secretary of State, the top U.S. official dealing with foreign governments, foreign businesses, U.S. companies trying to do work around the world. There's no corrupt intent. And while your husband's running a crooked foundation that have been stealing money from donors and diverting, there's no corrupt intent to have all of your communications parked under your personal control and outside the supervision and influence of the U.S. government. No corrupt intent at all if you're James Comey, because you're an idiot. You know, so there's a lot of there. The second link with Katya was a story that we did about George Soros and about the people who are profiting from the corrupt privatization of state-owned enterprises around the world, a process that really began in earnest around 1988 and 1989. I think it is, as I like to say, well past time for academics to put together a list of all the privatization transactions and then go back through it and say, all right, were these transactions priced fairly, whatever year in which they occurred? Did the buying group buy the things, the companies in question at their fair value, or was a cut rate price established by the political cronies? So I'm the president of Pick a Country, and I say, hey, Jason, you haven't been making enough at Crowdsource the Truth. How'd you like to buy this company over here that makes aluminum for $5 million, and the next day you can sell it for $150 million? Thing is, you just have to send me $75 million to a Swiss bank account that you'll establish on my behalf, and you can walk away with $70 million profit. Now, the crooked Jason would say, that sounds good to me. My flight leaves at 7 p.m. What are your wiring instructions? But, that's the way a lot of these transactions actually worked around the world. And let's put together a list of them. And so this is a story that lays some of the groundwork for that, and also focuses on the fact that the Clintons became involved while Hillary was a senator and while Bill was running, in theory, or had a role in the crooked Clinton Foundation in Ukraine by 2004. And books have been written, including one for Elton John, about the sad state of Ukraine in 2004, that the efforts to fight HIV and AIDS were frustrated in Ukraine because the government was so corrupt that the corrupt international aid organizations didn't want to get involved in it. And that sounds like the Clintons said, that sounds pretty good to us. Let's go
what
there.
What did Elton John have to do with that?
Elton John has long been campaigning to fight AIDS and against HIV and AIDS, and I think his foundation was founded in the 1990s. So he wrote a book about it, or somebody wrote a book about it. But he was, let's just say, I think he was duped by the Clintons, willingly perhaps duped, but duped by the Clintons. There has been a story that's gotten some attention that Ukraine is the largest donor to the Clinton Foundation, and unless what the people are referring there to is some Clinton Global Initiative project that I don't know about, this story is dead wrong. The largest government contributor to the Clinton Foundation, officially from the books, is the government of France, which has given approximately $300 million through the organization Unitaid, which gave the Clinton Foundation $650 million. So France's share of, you do the math, is around $300 million. I don't believe that the government has given more than, this says 10 million, which wouldn't even get it close to being the biggest government. You heard Michael Smith talk about Australia giving it over 100 million. And this is only 99 through 2014. It should be 97 through 2018.
But France is not even on there at all.
I know. So it's basically wrong.
What's up with this? This is
It's
just
the Wall Street Journal.
Oh,
Sometimes they make bad mistakes.
wow. Sometimes I'm trying to wait for them to not do that.
Yeah. And I did find this list. Yeah, this is the list that suggests Bosnia gave it $1 million. I mean, you and I were just.
France is down there at 0.8. So Bosnia gave more than France. Nigeria gave more than France.
I'm not.
Nah.
Yeah, ixnay on this. This is in Canada only at $4.5 million. I don't. So
Also,
this
10 million is nothing.
and we know that Ireland gave more than over 100 million.
Well, according to WikiLeaks, Saudi Arabia is between 10 and 25. So
Right.
this is a stupid fake news story. I'm surprised so many people caught on to this.
Well, and the thing that's really interesting to the fact that we would have this kind of a discussion is testament to the fact that there are no controls on the Clinton Foundation. The reports that are out there are all wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And the people in the IRS have said, you know what, we don't want to check this. It involves the Clintons and it'll embarrass us. Or maybe they are checking and there's so much work to do that they're eventually going to get it done by 2085.
Who owns the Wall Street Journal, Charles?
It's owned actually by News Corp, by Rupert Murdoch. Yeah. No, I think the television piece is separate. This is the print piece. The original news was split
so
into
it's the
two.
same guys that run the New York Post. Of course
Right.
it's fake.
There are some good reporters, people at the Wall Street Journal, but this story is about as wrong. This is an F minus. This story.
I wonder if Shane Harris contributed to this story.
Isn't he now at the New York
He's at the Washington Post, where he can be inaccurate over there.
Yeah. So this is interesting. If we hit this,
Twitter.
yeah, this is Sky News Australia says the U.S. president believes Australia was part of the conspiracy to spy on Trump, and I think it's very, very good news that Trump has established this personal relationship with the Prime Minister. Australia, of course, is, I believe, part of the Five Eyes spying program, and so now you have Canada, Australia,
New Zealand,
Great Britain, and is France in it or not? Maybe
no,
not.
there's the 9 eyes and the 14 eyes and
Right.
all these different eyes.
But it happens that many of those eyes have portions of their governments that, despite the fact that they had these robust intelligence operations, they nonetheless have decided to contribute money to something that doesn't exist lawfully as a corporation, to the tune of billions of dollars.
Yeah.
That's Trump can afford. He doesn't even drink. He can afford the champagne that might be in his glass comfortably. Many of these other prime ministers can't, which is maybe why they latch into the Clinton Foundation.
Try to get a little scratch on the side. They got a side hustle, Charles. This
Exactly.
prime minister gig just doesn't pay what it used to.
Right. So we talked about how the joint venture or the MOU was signed on the 22nd of February 2006. What I haven't really drilled into people yet, and I'm going to try to do it, I know these are numbers and people hate numbers, but the first attempted audit by the hopelessly corrupt Little Rock portion of BKD for the Clinton Foundation was dated on the 9th of June 2006 for 2005, 4, and previous years. Now, I've explained in the past that you can check financial statements. One of the beauties of the accounting system is you're required to report at least three different aspects of your financial performance. You're required to say, at the end of a given year, here's what my assets were, here's what my liabilities were, and here's what my net worth is. And you're required to do that for at least 2 years, right? You're also required to do a statement of your revenues and expenses, and finally, you're required to do what's called a cash flow statement. You didn't have to do a cash flow statement until, I believe, the late 70s, early 80s. Cash flow statement allows you to check and see, how much cash you really generated in a given year and how you generated that cash. So ordinarily,
Is there a column for theft?
there will be in the reports that I'm doing, but because you can prove that money disappeared. And one of the ways you can prove it is when you look, for example, at the cash flow statement, and you look at the balance sheet, and you compare the movement in accounts for property. Let's say property is stated, you have land, buildings, equipment, the gross value of all that, and depreciation, and the net value of all your property is shown. In this case, at the end of December 2004 and the end of December 2005. When you check the balance sheet movement on this piece of dog shit that the BKD has tried to say was a compliant audit, it shows that the balance sheet, the net value of net properties declined by 4,437,682. Okay, that's a precise number that you can calculate. The equivalent math on the cash flow statement says, no, no, no. Where we told you it was 4,437,682, actually it's 16,316,378.
Small error.
A difference of an 11,878 on the right-hand side, Jason. Yeah, just made it a little smaller. 11,878,696. Now that's not a round number, right? The chance of there being an offsetting entry going through the same process is, you know, so small.
What do you mean an offsetting entry?
Well, if you have this kind of a mistake, your financial statements are all going to not work. You can't have this kind of a mistake. So to have them work, you have to find an offsetting entry. And here, if you check the movement in payables, in the balance sheet from December 31, 2004 to 5, it shows that payables shrank by 9586018. But in the cash flow statement said, no, 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 they grew by 2292678. And the difference is the exactly offsetting number.
Got it.
This is prima facie evidence of massive fraud.
Got it.
Anybody, just this alone, you would look at this and say, this is not right, show me your working papers. And even dopey James Comey and you know, drunken Bob Mueller and crafty Rod Rosenstein, even those three dudes would not be able to listen to a real presentation by professionals and say, yeah, we're going to let this slide. It's only $12 million. You know, this is prima facie evidence of massive fraud in the first time that the Clinton Foundation attempted to put together financial statements 4 months after, you know, a dopey Alexander Downer signed a memorandum of understanding with Bill Clinton, who had no connection, official connection to the Clinton Foundation. They produced this thing, and you know, there's got to be. I know it's temptation. I haven't been to Australia. I look forward to going there one day. I'm sure it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm sure the shrimps are fantastic. The Barbies are fantastic. The beer is great. Huh?
That's a myth.
Okay, but the surfing's probably fun. There might be the odd good-looking woman down there, and so there are things to do. But I mean, even somebody who like Hillary Clinton, you know, has an alcohol-dependent diet, even somebody like that would look at this and say, this is crap. This is total crap. You know, the financial statements for the first year that Downer's team was putting money, they're horrible. And nobody evidently in Australia did any diligence on this because they put money in after February 2006, and they put money all the way through. They're putting money in as we speak now because they're that rich, I guess.
So is the guy who's the prime minister now, is he sort of like Trump in that he's against the establishment and that's why they're friends?
I hope so.
Because that seems to be what Trump is doing, particularly with the Ukrainian president. He's like, hey, we're both outside this political system. Your guys are trying to, you know, deep swamp you. Let's see what we can do together.
Right. So the very basis for the 2005 audit is all wrong. The audit includes this HIV/AIDS thing, but the tax form for the Clinton Foundation excludes the AIDS thing and turns around and includes the Katrina Fund, which is a 50% affiliate, but it does that incorrectly, and the Clinton Foundation had no authority to engage in religious activities, which the Bush-Clinton Katrina Fund asserted a right to do. So, I mean, you just look at this, you don't have to be a Harvard MBA, you don't have to be a Yale graduate, you don't have to be a Horseman graduate, you just have to maybe get through 3rd grade or 4th grade, maybe 6th grade, and you would see this for the fraud that it is. But evidently, you know, the top dogs around the Clinton Foundation,
top tigers,
you know, and the BKD folks, that's got to be, you know, Obama referred to ISIS as the JV. I mean, I don't know what this is. This is the pre-born. But
it's Pipsqueak League.
We haven't talked about the Tsunami Relief Fund. I bring that up to say, this is language from the Clinton Foundation marketing brochure, which alleges that, you know, Bill takes credit for being involved in the Tsunami Relief Fund, which was in part funded by Australia at a time, in a major way, when Downer was the foreign minister. So perhaps Downer and Clinton got together on the Tsunami Relief Fund. Note that this thing says that individuals, governments, and organizations responded generously, pledging close to $12 billion to the Tsunami Relief Fund. How much money is shown through the Clinton Foundation statements for the Tsunami Relief Fund?
Not $12 billion.
0. How much goes through UNICEF, the American Fund for UNICEF, which was one of the agents for 165 million? What happened to $12 billion for the people in the tsunami? Where did that money actually go? And it could be that, exactly, it could be that Downer's like, I'll give you 25 million for this thing. We got this honeypot of 12 billion for tsunami relief. No one's going to check that.
Wow. And there's a lot of Australian tourism in Indonesia, so that's like probably a lot of Australian families lost people and everything, and to know that that fishnet wearing weirdo is stealing their money would not sit well, I don't think.
And on the Clinton Foundation website, I've got a slight typo here, but it should say tsunamispecialenvoy.org. But that website address was created on the 3rd of August 2005, well after Bill Clinton had made massive fundraising appeals around the world. So what actual legal entity solicited money for the Tsunami Relief Fund? That's another project. Another 12 billion we've got to account for here.
Wow.
So if we go to the next page, this is some text which talks about, let's see, this is for the famous Obama MOU, which was drafted on the 12th of December 2008, or was effective the 12th of December 2008. It refers to something called the Clinton HIV/AIDS Initiative. Now, no legal entity ever was created with that name. It says that it's working with partner governments. It says, furthermore, that 70 countries around the world, you'd think there'd be some evidence in the public domain, 70 countries have been working with the Procurement Consortium Program. I find no evidence of any such legal entity having been created anywhere. Now, maybe it was created in, Vanuatu or some, small country.
Is that a real thing?
It is a real thing, yeah. But you note here that this is an official document. Valerie Jarrett signed this document. This document was passed along to the Senate to reassure our Senate that Hillary should be confirmed. And this document, which you would think it would be right, suggests that Australia, Ireland, Great Britain, Sweden, Canada, France, Denmark, Norway, and the Dominican Republic, as well as France, Brazil, Chile, all were governments that were involved in this HIV/AIDS initiative. Any government donations towards the Clinton Foundation needed to have been disclosed in aggregate in Forms 990 from 1998, 97 really, to 2007. And in that time frame, the total amount of grants declared by the Clinton Foundation as coming from governments was 0. Yet this document, written on the 12th of December 2008, effective that date, claimed that all these governments were involved. Where's the evidence of that? In California and in New York, you have to provide specific details to state regulators of those grants, and there are no such details provided. To top that off, this is the same document bragging about the Clinton Climate Initiative, claiming it was launched in 2006, that it has involved retrofitting hundreds of millions of square feet of public and private buildings. Now, retrofit project on 100 million square feet would be a very valuable project. Where is the math on all those retrofit projects? Who were the people who profited from those projects? Who financed those projects? And how in the hell did the Clinton Climate Initiative manage the time to work with 40 of the world's largest cities? Who was doing that work? Because guess what? There is no such thing as the Clinton Climate Initiative. There's never been a legal entity. And you would think that one of the 40 city mayors would have asked their legal department, give me a copy of the Articles of Incorporation for this Clinton Climate Initiative before I cut them a big check.
But you know what? I guess it's sort of like if the biggest producer in Hollywood called up and said, oh, hey, we want to hire you to do a job. You're not going to start digging in there and doing all your due diligence when these guys, but they're giving them money. It's different.
I would definitely, I would especially, if I got that story right now, anybody, like Warren Buffett wants to meet you, or we had some idiot try to claim that we were going to be briefing the people in Germany, the Reichstag. We sussed that guy out. So this whole, there has been no information provided in this whole period, this virtually 11-year period, concerning government grants all the way through December 31st, 2007. No information has been provided to our IRS. And of course, Lois Lerner said, that's fine.
Yeah.
You know, why would we want to find out incriminating evidence that would make my graft position that much tougher to keep?
Yeah.
Okay, so we go to the next page.
Just hate evidence.
So this information that we've shown it in a slightly different way to you before, but for the period 2007, 2008, and 2009, there is information on the on filings that was purposefully removed from the versions that are on the Clinton Foundation website because it's so incriminating, in my opinion. And why is it incriminating? This information purports to show entity performance, constituent entity performance of the Clinton Foundation in 2007, 8, 9. And it shows that $300+ million in grants went to something called CHI, total donations $412 million on the right-hand side. But out of that total incoming of $412 million, only $189 million, or 46% of the revenue, was spent on direct expenses. Now, you like to see a number more like 85%, not 46%. That's for CHI, okay? And there is a notional entity in these hidden financial statements. They refer to it as CCI. That thing had no government grants, it would seem, but other contributions on internet and stuff, totaling $30.4 million. But of the $30.4 million that Clinton Climate Initiative received, they spent $60,000 in total over 3 years on direct program expenses. The balance being for high living, professional, consulting, seriously, travel, professionals, yeah, whatever. But it's disgraceful that you would go around the world spending as much money on traveling, which, by the way, is not supposed to be that good for climate change, that you get $30 million and with a straight face brag about a project that only spent $60,000 on direct expenses for charity. It's absurd. And then the balance of the foundation, which they don't break down the performance of the balance of the foundation, that thing took in $86 million and only spent $9.8 million on direct programs, or 11%. So if you were to look at this as a serious, I got to take these headphones on it. Now I think about it. If you were to look at this as a scrupulous evaluator of charities, you wouldn't waste time on a meeting with the Clinton Foundation if you had access to this information, which is precisely why people at the Clinton Foundation said, you know, we better take these schedules out of the filings that we made in New York State and California and other places. So on our main website, where we encourage people to look before they donate, we'll just make this stuff disappear. Well, I brought it back to life for you.
Yeah.
Now, if we go to the next page.
Frankenstein's audit.
This is a little bit of elementary sleuthing, and I know some of the numbers are small. What I've done here is I have taken, in the first block, the Clinton Foundation frankly makes a mistake, and it's too late for them to change it. On the versions of their website, of their tax forms, they provide Schedule B, and they blank out the names of the donors in Schedule B, the major donors, but they identify the number of them and the amounts of them, right? So they also, in 2007, they refused to follow the law and tell you what governments contributed. But in 2008, they say, okay, yeah, we had government grants of $97,164,495. So then I look through the Schedule B and I say, can I make this math work? Can I reconcile the Schedule B with, which says all the identities of, it says all the grants, with the total government grants? So I first find Unitaid, which is $82,740,000, and I subtract that number from the total, and I come up with $14,424,177. Then I look at the balance of the donors, and I say, do any amounts add up to $14,424,177? And two do. One donor gives $8,176,663. The second donor gives $6,247,514, which means there were 3 government donors in 2008. But didn't that MOU talk about France and Sweden and Denmark and Norway and blah? Where's all that? Where are those grants? We know from our friends in Norway that there were substantial grants given in 2008 and 2009 that were government grants. We also know that in 2000, with regard to 2010, 11, 12, and 13, the Clinton Foundation ultimately was forced to decide that the money that went to Unitaid shouldn't have flown through the financial statements because it was a special deal. They weren't acting as principal for Unitaid, they were acting as agent. So those amounts should have come out, and they are removed by the Clinton Foundation, Clinton Health Access Initiative, in their financial statements around the 22nd of November 2013. if you were to take these Unitaid numbers out, which they should have done, if they're going to do it for 10, 11, 12, and 13, they should have done it retroactively to 2007. If you're going to do that, that's going to dramatically lower the reported revenues of the Clinton Foundation, and that's therefore going to make it likely that more and more 2% government donors will become necessary to disclose. So this right here, you look at this, in 2008 they're saying there are only 3 government donors. In 2009 they're saying there are only 2, Unitaid and one other. And we certainly know that Norway was a donor in both years. We know that Australia was a donor in both years. And so you look at this and you say, obviously this is wrong. And here, what the hell is BKD doing? And BKD has the list, the identities of the Schedule B participants in doing their work. They filled out the Schedule Bs or signed the forms for the Clinton Foundation in 7, 8, 9. So they would have known this. Are they so stupid at BKD that they can't say, well, wait a minute. You know, in your Schedule B, I see here you've got Sweden, you've got the United Kingdom, you've got Australia, and you're saying you don't have any government grants for them. I mean, it's just...
Well, it's difficult for them to see because they're looking through this hole in the tiger mask.
Exactly.
It's very tricky.
So if we go to the second piece of this page, a little bit further down here, this is something I only noticed recently, and its significance has only really made itself felt to me in recent weeks. On the 12th of December 2008, the Clinton Foundation auditors, in quotes, BKD, issued a document which was not technically allowed to be provided to New York State because the final deadline for filings in New York State in that year was November 15th, 2008 or thereabouts. It might have been the 17th because of the weekend. So they produced their document the 12th of December 2008, and they say they have $55 million, the Clinton Foundation, in 2007, $55.6 million of operating cash flow, total increase in cash that year of $47 million, ending cash of $85 million. When they do the same report, considering 2007 for 2008 and 2007, that again was filed late on the 31st of December 2009, they say, wait a minute, where we said we had $55.6 million of operating cash, actually we only had $12.7. So that's a $42.9 million difference, 77% reduction. Where we said we had a $47.8 million increase in cash in the year, it was only $4.7 million, a 90% reduction. Now, you know, you could quibble about 3% here and 5% there. 77 and 90% and 50% on your ending cash, that is material. You would have to explain that in great significance if you used a real accounting firm. But no, they used the Tiger. And the Tiger just buried this, did not do a footnote, did not explain the significance. And one big element of the significance is that they retroactively must have learned that in 2007, the $42.9 million that's taken off the cash was cash that Unitaid had advanced to the Clinton Foundation in that year to do work in future years. Very unusual.
Well, they're doing so well with that climate change, they wanted to get into loan sharking.
Right. Well, but the point is that generally speaking, charities, you know, if you're watching PBS or you're watching any of these solicitations, you'll be these incessant appeals for money. Very seldom do people, the charities are run to basically raise the money in a year and spend it the same year. Very seldom do you find a donor who's so generous and says, you know, for this charity, I'm going to give you money for 2020 in 2019. And that's in essence what Unitaid was doing, and yet these same clucks and, you know, professional people around this and IRS people, you know, allowed a form to go into the IRS saying Clinton Health Access Initiative, that's not a successor to any predecessor organization, not the one that had, you know, we didn't have $42.9 million advanced to us on December 31st, 2007 from Unitaid into an entity that was the biggest piece of the Clinton Foundation. No, forget all that. This is just an obvious fraud that the Clintons did not want emails going back and forth, people questioning now that she was Secretary of State, January 21st, 2009. They did not want emails flying around asking the Secretary of State, by the way, are you going to give us any of our money back? You know, so they had this system in part to cover up their prospective corruption, and I think in part to cover up or to lessen the likelihood that people, real investigators, real whistleblowers, would look at this and say, wait a minute, this is a massive ungoverned fraud that needs to be brought to account. Back in 2007, 8, 9, and 10. So if we go to the next page. Okay. We're going to fly through these final pages here. But so Downer, when he wasn't busy wearing women's clothing and stiletto heels and fishnet stockings, the Australian government was very pleased to issue this press release on the 20th of February when Hillary still had a chance of being president of the United States, and they thought they were cozying up to the future president of the United States. Really pleased to brag about this $25 million commitment. Remember, we showed you just now 2007, 8, and 9 purported government grants and identities of donors for those years. Very pleased to brag about this donation to something called Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative, which didn't exist on the 20th of February, 2008. Yet here's this press release. You have a link to it. It's issued by the government of Australia, their Indonesian embassy. How dumb are they? I mean, that they could not. This is days before the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, as Michael alluded to, shut this Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative down in the main U.S. Entity, Massachusetts, where its headquarters was based. It was the idea on Clinton, if he comes to you with a suspicious-looking plan, we're all in for that because we're really rich. Whatever he wants, give him the money. Don't check anything. I mean, where are the internal government documents within Australia? Where are the documents in Indonesia? Who did the diligence on this? What about the Australian mission in Vietnam? Why was Australia giving money with the Clintons to China in 2008 when China was holding the Olympics that summer and bragging about how developed they were? Why did China need aid from anybody?
Well, it's just a payback from funding Bill's campaign, probably.
Right. I mean, are we now going to be in the business of soliciting aid for, Appalachia, let's say, or different places, or the homeless who are getting killed down in Chinatown? No, just the U.S. government. I mean, why is China, if it's such a rich country, taking aid from Australia?
It's weird.
Yeah. So if we go to the next page.
And why take aid rather than just like reducing, import tariffs on Chinese products or something?
Right. And then here's the thing I referenced that Michael was talking about, the Commonwealth. And here's yet another press release. This is from actually a group that is, I believe, in Australia. The Star Observer is a newspaper that's interested in in gay and lesbian and other issues. But they have this long article, 20 April 2008, championing this thing. Bill Clinton is devoted to fighting HIV, talking about yet another memorandum. Bill Clinton was not an officer of the Clinton Foundation or HIV/AIDS or any part of anything to do with the Clinton Foundation on the 20th of April 2008. He just wasn't. But here, the Australian government's all in for this. Right, Downer's bragging about this. Go to the next page.
I mean, it obviously can't be that they're actually stupid, right? I mean, there's
I think
on
it's
the scam.
Yeah, both. And here we have a story that comes out at the time of the MOU. AusAid has turned out to be one of the world's biggest contributors to the William J. Clinton Foundation. I mean, at least they have the correct name of the William J. Clinton Foundation there. But they've done no work, no diligence. And they describe this during a whirlwind visit by Mr. Clinton to Australia in February 2006. I'll say whirlwind. It was mostly whirl, not too much wind.
This is the Bill Clinton home for wayward strippers.
Yeah, and it notes in this article, Mr. Clinton, who earns $350,000 for a speaking engagement.
Wow.
Now, it says he gave between $500,000 and $1 million to of his personal wealth. Well, actually, no. What he did, the family seems to have done, is they created, illegally, a private foundation in 2001, or I think it was December of 2001, through which they channeled a bunch of contributions to the Clinton Foundation. And we're going to be having chapter and verse right before November 15th, the filing deadline, explaining why that Clinton Family Foundation, we've done it once, but we're going to do it in more detail, is in serious trouble because they gave money. That Clinton Family Foundation was run by Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton. Kind of tough for them to claim that they didn't understand what was going on at the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Public Charity. They gave many millions of dollars in what I would call our taxable expenditures. They characterized the donations going to the Clinton Foundation as being to a public charity when it was not. The penalty for the first infraction is a stiff fine. The penalty for the second infraction is you get shut down and you potentially go to jail. And they have multiple, in my judgment, felony counts of tax fraud arising from the Clinton Family Foundation unfairly and illegally taking credit for making substantial donations to this Bill Hillary Chelsea Clinton Foundation, which is a fraud. So we go to the final page. This is a press release referring to Bill Clinton as the founder of the William J. Clinton Foundation on the 19th of May, 2009. It is a press release extolling the virtues of the Clinton Climate Initiative, again, something that does not exist, okay? And mentioning that this Clinton Climate Initiative is going to get involved with a city in Australia, Melbourne, Australia, not to mention some of these other cities. So the Clinton Climate Initiative has many guises. One of them was that they would encourage cities that are, where they're saying half of all the world's population lived in cities in 2019. That figure is expected to grow to 70%. The simple-minded theory is cities are places where people congregate, therefore they're places where CO2 is emitted, they're places where a lot of heating and cooling occurs. Let's retrofit these cities and we'll save a portion of the planet in that way. When in reality, what these, I think, are excuses for the mayors of these crooked cities to travel around to junkets around the world, surrounded by grifters like the Clintons and their grifter friends, concocting billion-dollar deals financed by crooked banks and investment firms with the optics that they're green and good, with the reality that they're just swamp deals. There's nothing charitable about it. It's business development for the swamp. That's what this is. And there is, I challenge, I've done it before, and the Clinton Foundation is yet to come back and say, no, we have a Clinton Climate Initiative. They certainly do not. There is no such legal entity. So this went on a little bit longer than normal. We had to cope with the internet dynamics. I know you have questions about our Sarajevo visit. I'm happy to try to answer some of them.
Well, it was mostly, as I recall, people wondering if we had the story right with regard to Franz Ferdinand getting shot. They say he was blown up in a car.
Well, you were there on the street.
The sign on the building said he was shot, didn't it?
I leave it to the experts on that to figure out exactly what his cause and means of death. I've read shot. You claim it's blown up.
Well, I don't claim. This is
somebody
what people
claims
in the comments were saying. I mean, again, my fascination with that was we've always heard about this and it just gets accepted as fact. And first of all, going there and standing there is like, wow, this is kind of super historic spot. It really shrinks it down kind of to life size when you're there. But also the concept that how do we know that that's what happened? Somebody said that. Maybe that was social engineering and fake news in 1900 whatever.
Well, there definitely is, because I think that I've heard this story. I'm not going to try to repeat the detail, but there are definitely those who believe that World War I went from a modest incident to a world war by accident, that it could have been contained, but it wasn't obviously contained, and it ended up being one of the, actually no wars are good, but that war, in the casualties that so many, not just Americans, but people around the world suffered enormous, brutal casualties from mustard gas, trench warfare, really ugly stuff. But there are those who believe that it didn't need to have happened in the way that it did happen.
Well, I mean, again, just from the controversy that was stirred up in the Crowdsource The Truth and Sunday with Charles audience, it seems like it could have easily been fake news. You know, Charles, speaking of fake news and social engineering, there is someone who was a frequent contributor to Crowdsource The Truth, who I now believe I have definitive evidence has been lying to us, and I'm going to be preparing an expose on that very soon. People previously had tried to discourage this type of thing by saying, oh, you're fighting with other YouTubers and we're all the truth movement. That that cannot be the policy. We cannot have an open door policy where anybody who claims they're telling the truth can suddenly be embraced with open arms, because it just invites liars to try to deceive us. So very soon I'll be having a report on that, and probably the bulk of it will be on Patreon, because we're going to try to keep the flow of information here to, the type of thing that you are sharing is national news type stuff. What YouTubers are lying to us is maybe not quite as important, but it is still important. Flushing out these social engineers and stopping these campaigns of misinformation, disinformation, I think is very important. So I really do want to encourage our viewers to get onto subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth and patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's critically important. Even if people are only watching the free shows, even if they're only tuning in on Sundays to watch Sunday with Charles, I can't keep this show going without your support, particularly not now that I have this huge credit card bill from going to Sarajevo. So I really do hope that people who are watching right now, still, the number of viewers we have at this moment exceeds the number of sponsors to Crowdsource the Truth. So even if just the people watching now would go over there and become sponsors, it would absolutely help sustain the show. I really appreciate the information that you've put together for us this week, Charles, and bringing Michael Smith was excellent. I'm going to have a great report tomorrow on Light on Conspiracies with Ole Damagard. That's another show that sponsors get to enjoy on Patreon. Ole and Cody Snodgrass will be joining me, along with a new guest, a guy by the name of Dr. Gregory Ford, who is an Iraq veteran. He's just written a book that's coming out in the next few days that's going to reveal stunning details about crimes and lies related to the weapons of mass destruction and what was actually going on in Iraq, revelations related to 9/11. It might be the most important episode we've ever done on Ole's show, and it's come to my attention that a lot of people don't even realize that that show is happening every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern. So please get on to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and check out all the exclusive content there.
Sounds good.
There you go. Anyway, Charles, that's it for today. I will have those behind-the-scenes Sarajevo videos coming very soon. Not tonight, but soon.
Hopefully they're not like Jackie Chan outtakes or anything.
No, nothing like that. It's from the day before when we were walking around scouting. I'll run it by you before.
That's okay. I'm sure it's fine.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a great night.